Well, good evening, ladies and Allens. How's everyone doing tonight?
Well, sorry.
That's the wrong
Still
show.
got it going on, man.
Welcome. No, that's not it either. What up, hashtag nation, hashtag sports? How's Bills Mafia? How's everybody doing? We are back from our 3-week hiatus to give you guys some Bills content. We actually released a couple things in the interim, some shorts here and there. Paul and I actually got back in the car today, so we have some episodes on the horizon coming for you guys. And speaking of on the horizon and coming for you guys, hey guy, hey bud. He's not ready yet. Anyway,
Paying attention.
I am flanked by the usual.
He knows
suspects.
we're laughing at him, but he can't hear what we're saying.
He's got his headset in. I don't know what's going on. As I am flanked with the usual suspects, minus Kaiser Soze, Joe, Ryan, and Paul. He found a hat that fits. I did find a hat that fits. In the brand new hashtag studios. We're going to be talking about camp battles tonight. Which battles are you excited to see, if there are any battles in camp? I'm sure there are some that you guys are looking forward to seeing when the Buffalo Bills take the camp over at is it still at Fisher?
Still
Rhino?
at Fisher for
Still
now.
at Fisher
we'll see.
for now?
Yeah, see
Yeah,
how
we'll
long
see.
that lasts.
I even might be going to Bob Boozer Field. We'll check that out.
Yeah, man, little inside information. We'll see.
We'll see. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining us tonight. If you're joining us, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Remember, all of our episodes will be on iTunes and Spotify. Hit up all of our socials: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Tonight's show is sponsored
Threads.
by
You
Mr.
guys have
Rogers
Threads
Homes.
yet?
What's
You gotta
that?
Get with it, man. Threads. Get on Threads.
What the hell are you talking about?
Come on, man.
Joe, any help?
Threads, I ain't got no drip.
It's a Zuckerberg's answer to Twitter. So you can choose the genocidal maniac or the right-wing lunatic.
Aren't they going to get in the cage anytime soon?
I heard that they wanted to do it at the Roman Colosseum, that there was like an active movement to try to get it done, and the Italian government was entertaining the idea, and then all of a sudden they were just like, oh no, we're just kidding, we wouldn't do that.
Now I'll wait for Paul to.
If anyone would promote it,
the Italian government will entertain anything.
Listen, I don't speak ill because there's too much chest hair on this panel for me to just assume. So,
oh my God, Paul, did we have fun today in the car?
It was a good time. We did have a good time.
It was very fun. We
I don't know what the hell's going to come out of it, but we recorded a bunch of episodes, and we'll see.
Brucey came out of it. That's what came out of it today was Brucey. Okay, guys. So here I have a list of obviously the Buffalo Bills roster. I believe is at 90 or 91. I can't really remember. What up, Daniel Gowers? Everybody in the chat, welcome tonight. You have 15 guys that are 30 plus, and I just felt it was interesting to try to list those guys before we get into these camp battles for everyone. I think we pretty much know that some of these players are guaranteed to make the roster, but some of these guys may, because of their age, may prevent them. If they're like neck and neck with a younger player that was brought in and a younger, lesser contract, we'll see. But on the offensive side of the ball, you got Mitch Morse, Mance, Shell, Quisenberry, and Murray. On the defensive side of the ball, you got Jones, Phillips, Floyd, Miller, Medikevich, Klein, Poyer, Hyde, Malone, and Shane Ray. Reading those names off, obviously, like I said, there's some guys that are just, they're making the team. You got Jones making the team, Miller making the team, Poyer and Hyde. But I mean, we could talk about Mr. AJ Klein, who is currently, per our lads, the third on the depth chart. But any of those names jump off the page for any of you? Joe, I want to go Joe, Ryan, then Paul. Any of those names jump off the page at you?
As far as what, making the team or
just anything.
No, especially if you look at the defensive side, with McDermott now taking the helmet defense, I think that changes up things a little bit. So no, I don't think that a lot of those names should feel safe right now for the Buffalo Bills.
Gotcha. Rhino, what you got?
I think, anyone who's not a starter from last season, I think definitely has to consider themselves fighting for a roster spot at this point. I think this is when you're talking about one of the top teams in not only the AFC, but in the NFL, every position that's not a starting position should be deep enough to where it's not there is a competition going on, right? Gone are the days where, the Buffalo Bills are trying to fill starter positions and then hoping they also have enough guys to keep on the roster in case somebody goes down. There's like 2 spots, I think, that you can make the argument that they have to figure out what they're going to do. That's that middle linebacker, whatever they do at linebacker to fill the need for Tremaine Edmonds. And then they've got to fill a guard spot. And the guard spot is like there's 3 guys that could fill those 2 spots. And then it seems like they've done enough, or they feel comfortable enough at the linebacker position to figure that out. And that's probably where Klein, the name you mentioned, becomes a guy that might need to worry about his spot. Because I think a lot of folks just assumed that Klein would fill that Edmonds role. But based on the way that they've drafted and the way that they've approached free agency, I don't know how concerned they are about filling that Edmonds role. And you may just see a different type of defense trot out there on week 1, where that masher middle linebacker, true middle linebacker type of guy isn't necessary. And that's where Klein, the first calling card may be Klein getting released a couple of weeks into camp, veteran, not going to hold him through the 90-day cut down into 53, give him a chance to catch on with somebody. That may be the first sign that this defense is going to look entirely different in 2023.
Ooh.
Yeah, so what I find kind of interesting is if you go on to the Buffalo Bills roster on buffalobills.com, they've got 9 linebackers on the roster right now, and of them are listed Von Miller and Shane Ray at linebacker. I find that really interesting, right? Because when you look at the players listed at defensive end, I think there's only 6 or 7 of them. And then you have 9 defensive tackles, right? So there's a lot going on in the interior interior of that offensive or that defensive line. And kind of to Ryan's point, anybody who wasn't a starter last year, I think is, sort of should feel uncomfortable. With that being said, there's going to be names that drop off this roster because you need to find a way to get those like rookie, unsigned free agent players on your roster, right? Like, so keeping, like even keeping a player like Tim Settle, maybe Tim Settle falls off the map for you because, now you got Puna Ford, or maybe, you might bring Puna Ford in and be like, that maybe wasn't such a hot idea. Like there's still a lot to be looked at. And they have no idea how the roster is going to play out, but there's going to be a lot of names that fall off, even just this defensive line that people are going to be surprised by just because they're names that folks are familiar with. But be careful when you're looking at the roster because you've got players hiding in positions they probably aren't really playing, like Shane Ray and Von Miller both being listed at linebacker on buffalobills.com. That's not really a fair representation.
Is it because Shane Ray picked 49?
I don't know. I don't know. Didn't wait for that body to cool down, did he?
Yeah, I think Paul and I kind of touched on this a little bit today when we were talking in the car, but we were having so much fun being idiots that we really didn't complete the episode with the camera.
No, sure didn't.
We talked a little bit. I mean, that episode will be coming out because you guys can get the the full behind the scenes stuff if you hit up our Patreon. But we were talking a little bit about the defensive end position. We were talking about the running back position and, certain things that are going on. Ryan, you brought up a very interesting point prior to the show itself. And you said, listen, what battles are you talking about? Are you talking about what are you excited to see? But like, are there specific battles that may be perceived by the Bills Mafia of what's coming up in camp when the Buffalo Bills kick off?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned one that's that guard battle, right? You've got kind of like 3 guys to fill 2 guard spots. You've got McGovern and Bates, who are the one, the free agent, new free agent. The second was the bring back free agent, and then they spent a 2nd round pick on Osiris Torrance, which is a clear position where if you're drafting somebody in the 2nd round, there's a very real chance that they're expected to contribute, at least if not in season 1, at least, or at least if not in week 1 by the end of the season in their first year. So you've got 3 guys. And I think Mario, you made a good point before the show, like Bates, they're not paying him backup money, right?
No.
Like, but at the same time, are they paying to be a bridge for when Morse decides to ride off into the sunset, which very well could be after this year? He's a concussion away. You've kind of heard all of those conversations, right? Yeah. So, that may be why they gave Bates the money that they gave him. Hey, we'll plug him in at guard if we need him. That's where he's going to fit in year 1. But going forward, maybe he's your center of the future. We'll go get Torrance, but that guard battle I think is going to be really interesting. And then the other thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing is what do they do with their three safeties? Because they have a third safety now, a legitimate third safety. And Taylor Rapp, and I don't think they brought him in as insurance.
I thought you were talking about Dean Marlowe. My bad.
Oh,
I think they brought Rapp in to be a significant contributor to this defense. Now he's obviously there in case a safety goes down. You've got additional depth. You've got a guy who knows the system. So they learned from their mistake last year. But don't think that this whole season is going to start with Taylor Rapp not getting onto the field unless there's an injury in front of him. So I'm really interested to see how they use those three safeties. Probably to fill that hole left by Edmonds is going to be quite a bit of three safety formations for this team, which is going to be a departure from what they usually do.
And to your point, right, with the Bates signing, I think that's one of those ones where you look at it and say, well, listen, it's going to cost us some money, but do we have the draft capital, or can we afford to address this position in the draft? And when you look at where they were likely targeting interior offensive linemen, you knew you needed a guard, right? There was no mystery. Everybody in the world knew you needed a guard. And you probably didn't have the picks to say, well, let's chase a center in the fourth. Listen, nobody wants that center. Right, you're chasing a center in the fourth or fifth. Right, nobody wants that player. So you re-sign Bates, right? Because it buys you the time that you need, but it comes at a premium. And you're right. Whose roster spot is that premium at? Right, because at some point, the money that you're spending on Bates is going to cost somebody else their job, because the dollars and cents have to balance out somewhere. But as Ryan was just saying, three safeties. When you look at the NFL, how many teams? Can you look across and say, oh yeah, they play three safeties in third down, right? Like Buffalo is in a unique situation, especially with McDermott now at the helm of this defense. What kind of changes do you see? Do you think this is going to be a team that's going to try and generate more turnovers? Are they going to try and generate more pressure by having better coverage? Like what's the move here?
Well, I think the move also changes pre-Von Miller and post-Von Miller too. What does the defense look like before Von Miller? I think we'll see a lot of those three safety sets before Von Miller, and depending how those work, then it depends how much that gets used. Because I don't think that you can count on turnovers, right? For me, a lot of turnovers, the ball bounces the right way. The quarterback makes an errant throw. You can't rely on those things all the time. So for me, you're looking at protecting your back end to try to get more pressure, especially for a team in the Buffalo Bills who, without Von Miller, couldn't get any pressure on the quarterback. We saw it late in the season, and we saw it in the playoffs. So I think that should be the main focus going into this season. And to be honest, and I know Ryan spoke about how the three safeties would come in handy helping out with Edmonds. I think the three safeties also might come in handy, because we have to remember the secondary is going to look very different this year than it did at the beginning of last year anyway, with Trey White being back, right, fully healthy now. Kair Elam, his role is going to be a little bit different than it was to start last year. So there are going to be a lot of changes in that defensive secondary already. So you add that piece, hopefully to get a little more pressure on the quarterback, and in a division where, let's be honest, Rodgers coming in is a factor. Tua hopefully healthy all year, that he improved, whether we want him or not. We make fun of him, that's fine. But then we still have 2 wins in New England, which is great. But yeah, so
So Mario, let me ask this, right? Joe just brings up talking about the cornerback position. Does Taylor Rapp allow your corners to play a bit more free? Because, like, let's be honest, right? I think we all got a little tired of watching Travis Kelce absolutely beat the living hell out of linebackers in the NFL. But now that you have likely one less linebacker in a lot of different looks, does that free up the corners to play a little bit more free? And is that sort of a departure from what we've seen from a typical Sean McDermott defense?
I don't think until McDermott does that, I don't see him changing up anything that he's doing. And I think that, Paul, we talked about it a lot when we go over the defense. A lot of these guys have been on this defense for a long time. And what happens is you start to develop tendencies. When Leslie Frazier was here, there was a bunch of tendencies. Guys would be able to scout Buffalo and say, okay, this is what they do in this situation. This is okay. And it happens all the time. However, now that you brought a lot of these different pieces in, you're starting to see they could do like I said, if you want to go to a 3 safety look, I haven't seen too many times, like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I haven't seen too many times where the Buffalo Bills have actually done that. And you bring in a legitimate safety now, not just like, you know, we joke about it with Dean Marlowe, but it's like, oh, you know, they got Poyer, Hyde, and Marlowe on the field. Like, what are they doing? They got Poyer, Hyde, and Neal on the field with Teron Johnson. Like, what are they doing with this? What are they doing with that? It doesn't scare anybody. When you bring Taylor Rapp in, when you got Hyde and Poyer there, let's just say it what it is. You got Jordan Poyer back because he wanted too much from Miami, and then you got Taylor Rapp. Both of them together are going to fill that role as far as being that guy where, you know, if something happens with Hyde, you know, Poyer played center field all last year. You know, this is more, I think, about insurance policies than anything else on the defensive side of the ball. If McDermott wants to run the exact same thing that he's run, you know, in past years, he has the insurance to do that if any of his guys get hurt. That's why the question I was going to pose to you guys was like, did the Buffalo Bills on the defensive side of the ball more specifically, did they treat the symptoms and not the disease? You know what I mean? Like, oh, great, you got Leonard Floyd. Is that if Vaughn gets hurt again? Or is that if, you know, did you bring him in to so you can get rid of Shaq Lawson, or you can get rid of Boogie Basham, or did you bring Rapp in because you weren't sure that Micah Hyde and Poyer could stay healthy for 17 games in the playoffs? Like, what is the true reason? Was it to give different looks, or was it because you're worried about these guys getting hurt? I know it sounds silly to say that, but what was the reason for bringing those guys in? Like, I'm not certain, but I'm not.
I will tell you that if you look up and down the Bills roster, and Ryan, you probably noticed this already, but the Bills are not small in the secondary, right? So if you look at just the safety position, right, there's not a single safety that's below 6 foot. Almost all of them are exactly 6 foot. And at the cornerback position, the guys that they brought in, they're all big guys. Christian Venford's 6'1". Alex Austin is 6'1". Cameron Dantzler is 6'2". The smallest guy is Cam Lewis, right? Like that's like your smallest guy as far as your cornerbacks. Like we always laugh about Teron Johnson, but he's 5'11", right? Like Cam Lewis is your smallest guy on the roster at 5'9". So this is a big secondary. And I think that's kind of gone unnoticed when we talk about the Bills' defensive rosters. The secondary is a lot taller than you probably think.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, look, you know, like you said, Mario, if there was a situation last season where before the injuries, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, and Dean Marlowe, I know he wasn't on the roster at the time, but if those three were on the field at the same time, something has gone horribly wrong in the secondary, right? Like that's the thought process. Like you're down to Dean Marlowe having to shift over and play a corner position. If they come out week one, play one on defense, and you've got Poyer, Hyde, and Rapp on the field, I'm not thinking something's wrong. I'm thinking, okay, what's he dialing up here? Like, what is this for? Right? Like, I can completely see a situation in Kansas City where Buffalo throws Poyer, Rapp, Teron Johnson, Milano in rotation at Travis Kelce. And it's just we're going to play everybody else. We're going to play zone over the top. We're going to play some type of a cover 2 defense. And it's just going to be like it. You think of it like basketball, right? It's going to be like a box and one. We're just going to throw a man-to-man body at Kelce.
It's a cover one robber. It's cover one.
Yeah,
robber.
I mean, everybody else is just going to play in a zone behind. Don't let anybody get farther behind you. Let's put our horses out on the field and let them get after Mahomes. And let's see if our big body D-backs can stick with Kelce long enough to not make it an easy hot route throw, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I can completely see that type of formation. So when we talk about did they treat the symptom and not the disease, I think it's part and parcel. Like it's one and the same, right? The problem was when you didn't have Von Miller on the field, you struggled to get pressure on the quarterback. Mm-hmm. How do you solve that? You go out and get Leonard Floyd. You also go out and get bigger in the interior defensive line to bring to free up those ends to let them create some havoc. If Von Miller goes down, awesome. You've got depth behind him where Leonard Floyd plays a little bit more snaps than you had initially planned. But that's a good problem to have, right? Like it's a good problem to figure out how am I going to manage all of these different guys with all these different talents, with all these different snap counts. rather than, oh my God, we just lost Micah Hyde. Now what do we do? Right? Like that's the problem that they're trying to solve for, is that we're going to use all these guys and we're going to be creative with it. If one of them goes down, cool. We're just going to handle things a little bit differently, but we still feel solid in our talent in the starting 11.
Yeah, and then just thinking of that, Joe. I mean, could this have been a manifestation of a couple of years ago? I can't remember the specific year, but Milano went down, and a lot of that time, Poyer was coming down in the box and playing next to Edmonds. I'm sorry. So. Is this like, was the Taylor Rapp signing kind of like, oh, hey, we've done this before, where we've played a dime look, where we've had three safeties in the field, 3 corners in the field, and we just had one linebacker. Is that something that we could see more of, like the way that, Paul and Ryan are talking about? Is that something that, like, we always talk about it just being a package? Okay, it'll be a package on 3rd and long. It'll be this and that. Is that something that the package that, like, they could just come out in a majority of the time and like have someone as their base, or no?
Well, I think it's a multitude of things. I think what you said is correct about when Milano went down and Poyer came up, and maybe to help with the Edmonds thing. But also remember, we also signed Rapp before Poyer resigned. So I feel like that was kind of another thing that we were looking at the time as, hey, if Poyer doesn't resign with us, because when Poyer left, all signs were saying he wasn't coming back, right? Like when the contract was over. So we get Rapp, we get him at a pretty decent price. So you see a guy, and that to me, that signing, especially now, proves to me that Bean is always looking for the deals, right? And it doesn't matter what position. He didn't go into it, get him and say, oh, well, now we don't have to worry about Poyer anymore. No, he still wanted Poyer. So I think that there was discussion as to both, A, if Poyer doesn't come back, we have a guy there, so we don't have any issues. And B, let's say Poyer does come back, do we still have a spot for him on the start? Because he's going to want to play a majority of downs. Yeah. And when you talk about the issue with Von Miller and some of the other defensive ends, let's not forget about the rotations that McDermott loves to pull, whether we like them or not. He didn't have Von Miller on the field all too much, last year at certain times. End of games where the game wasn't in doubt, Von Miller wasn't on the field at all. So, we are still going to see a lot of that rotation. But I do think that there is going to be a place for Rapp on this team, whether it be like the Kansas City game. The Jets have weapons too. Let's not forget about that. Sure, the Jets are going to jet, but they have weapons too. And now they have a quarterback that's going to get them the ball. You can see this kind of manifest into its own thing as the season progresses. And I think it's a good, like Ryan said, it's a good problem to have.
I love the verbs we've created on this show. Allen's going to Allen, Jets are going to jet. And by the way, Paul, I can read the chat, Paul, by the way.
I know you can.
Yeah, I mean, Joe brings up a good point, right? Like, because Rapp signed before Poyer, I think that really spoke to, and I think the same thing. I just wanted to circle back on the whole guard situation after, but they signed Rapp and they got him at a deal, and it was like, well, what about Poyer? And I really think the conversation, because this does happen in business, right? Like, we're not going to sit and wait for the maybe and lose out on a guy that we feel can fit that role. So they signed Rapp. They also got Poyer, and I think a lot of the question was, well, do we want Poyer back? We've already got Rapp, and it's like, well, we'll figure it out, right? Like, we want Poyer back. We signed a guy that we like his talent. We'll figure it out, to Joe's point. And then when we go back and look at the guards, it was, we signed Ryan Bates. Do we need a guard, or do we need a center? And then all of a sudden you get into the second round, and the consensus best interior lineman in the draft was all of a sudden there. And it's like, well, we'll figure it out. Like, we're not going to pass up that talent because we already signed Ryan Bates to, a long-term deal. Like, we can figure out other plans for Bates. We can figure out how to make the roster spot work. So I think this is really just the team. And it's something I've been critical of this team for doing for quite some time. It seemed like they were afraid to sign starter level talent to be backups. And now it just seems like they're just going to sign talent and we'll figure out the rest on the back end. And that's really what you need to do if you're going to make that additional push into the postseason, because you can't be an injury away. Obviously, Allen is different. Josh, anytime you lose your quarterback, that's entirely different. But you can't be a free safety injury away from a Super Bowl. You have to be able to fill those positions, next man up mentality. But in order to be next man up, you've got to have talent behind your starters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, and remember, like last year, Cam Lewis was playing safety for this team, right?
Yeah.
Because something had gone horribly wrong.
Because something
right?
had gone horribly wrong. Yeah, and you go back to that Minnesota game, like Cam Lewis is playing safety in that game where Justin Jefferson makes that disgusting catch, right? Like it's just one of those things. If you got a safety there, that maybe those boys had learned from the whole DeAndre Hopkins fiasco where you lost that game in Arizona. Like, listen, you don't need a pick there. Just knock the ball down.
Joe,
you
okay?
How impactful that Minnesota game would have been. Marlowe at the trade deadline, right? Because they were in such a bad way for the safety help. Like they traded a 7th round pick for Dean Marlowe. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Something has gone really wrong, and we're scrambling now to figure out how to patch these holes. If you buy the epoxy before the ship leaves port, you don't have to figure out what you're going to do when we spring a leak. Like you've got to have contingency plans already on the roster because pickings are slim as the season wanes on.
I'm going to go to Joe in a second, but I definitely want to get Joe took off his headset twice. I got to find out what that is. But first of all, Paul or Ryan, I don't know if those are two entirely the same things when you talk about Bates and Rapp, because I think you were sitting there and, he was signed before Poyer and all that stuff. I think the Bears backed the Bills into a corner when it came to Bates, because wasn't he transition tagged, if I'm not mistaken? Wasn't he able to go out and try to see what kind of deal he could get? And but Chicago gave him, and Bills were like, we don't have any guards. We need to give him this.
You can make the argument that that's a gesture of goodwill to the player, though, right? Like you can, from a business standpoint, the right thing to do is say, go find out what your market value is. Like, we're going to transition tag you. We really want you back, but we're going to let you go figure out what the market is. And then we'll so I don't know that it has any necessarily bearing of if they felt like they were getting put over a barrel. Bean's not the type to cave to that type of pressure. In the past, he hasn't, at least. So, maybe, but I think part of the Bates deal was just like, transition tag because we can use it. Go find your market value. And we'd really love to have you back. And they showed that by bringing it back. It goes a long way in building that goodwill with a player.
Yeah. Who they stole from the Eagles, by the way.
So listen, first Paul brings up the Minnesota game, which I remember very clearly. And Cam, see this.
Yeah, see, there we go.
Guys. And then the moment I put my headset back on, he's talking about DeAndre Hopkins 3 years ago and the Hail Mary or whatever. Like, that's why I took my headset off twice. I couldn't believe it.
It's still the pinnacle of Kyler Murray's career. So
it's the only good thing.
That's still the pinnacle of Kyler Murray's career.
So, yeah.
That was the top of the mountain for Kyler Murray. He's got short legs, so that was a long walk for him. That was the mountain cat.
Every Kyler Murray meme that shows Ted, my turn, assholes, is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay, so guys, we're spending an awful lot of time talking about the front end of this roster, with battles and this and that. But I do think, I'd like to add Edwards' name to that, though, Ryan. You want to talk about Torrance, you want to talk about Bates, you want to talk about McGovern. I think Edwards, he got brought in very early in the free agent process. Like, he was brought in. I want to say he was brought in early. I don't know if it was before Rapp, but I want to say he was brought in. And we know with the pattern that's been developed with Brandon Beane, he likes to try to get some of these guys in the free agent period before the draft in case the draft doesn't pan out how he wants it. So I think those four are going to be just, having a knife fight at camp to see who starts. But if going into camp with those four as your choices as far as the guards go, I want to start with Joe, then go to Paul, then Ryan. If those are the four that you're picking from to protect Josh Allen, are you happy with that? Chat, you chime in too. Are you happy with those four names? McGovern, Edwards, Bates, and Torrance. Are you happy with those two of those four being the guards in front of Josh Allen for the 2023 season?
I don't know what else the Bills could have done. to get better at the offensive line. Not saying they couldn't have gotten better, but from where we were last year to where we are now, at the end of last year to where we are now. Listen, and I think it was Paul who hit on it, or maybe it was Ryan. I don't know, but you talk about a guy in Osiris who, I projected him to be the Bills' first-round draft pick, and so he's sitting there in the second round. You love that situation. That's my favorite pick of the draft in Buffalo Bills. I think, he's the best interior guard. He's the first time Beans, went to a guard in the draft. I love that pick, and I'm very happy. I am happy comparatively to last season. I don't think that this Bills offensive line is going to come out and be a top 5 offensive line with the addition of these guards, but I do think that we're better than we were last year, and that's a lot. That's what you can ask for, just be better than last season.
I mean, Mario, Jesus Christ, we're not that far removed from Bobby Hart getting snaps at guard. Like,
Right.
What are we talking about here, man? Like, absolutely, you take these four over the options that you had. I mean, like,
I want it to be
Talk
Richard
about-
Garage season.
I mean, you talk about the quarterback purgatory that you were in before you
Oh,
got Josh Allen. Like, look at the
yeah.
guard play
Mhm.
from like Andy Levitri on, like what that guard
Oh.
position has looked like for the Buffalo Bills. It's been just an absolute
Jordan
abysmal
Mills?
situation. I would love Paul now to chime in now that I've mentioned Bobby Hart, because he's just got just ready to roll now that Bobby Hart's name got brought up.
Funny you say that, because we talked about Bobby Hart in the car this week. So Bobby Hart did make an appearance, but we were
That's in
referencing.
show business called a callback.
Yeah, sure is. Except we were referencing Bobby Hart still sending condolences to Joe Burrow's knees. So that was what the reference to that joke was. I'm happy to say that I'm glad that the team has recognized that players like, and no offense to the player, did a good job. An example of why you develop talent, because it came up when you needed it, but why players like Ike Bucker just aren't good enough, right? Like, don't get me wrong, gritty as gritty gets. He was on your practice squad for a really long time. You were able to develop him. You needed him to play. He was able to step up for you. Congratulations on developing the talent and then leveraging it when you need it. But that's not always good enough for you, right? So you look at a player like David Edwards. David Edwards played with Cromer and with the Rams. And the truth is, Buffalo really lacked that player who could help that communication last year across the offensive line. I think that was pretty obvious. That offensive line was a mess last year, just not only from injuries, but from communication. There were times that line didn't look like it knew what the hell it was doing. I think a player like David Edwards makes an impact because he can help with that maturation of the offensive line. Now, if he starts for you, then fine, right? That just means that a player like Osiris Torrance, you're just going to wait on that a little bit, right?
Mhm.
I'm good with the direction that they're going. I do think it's an improvement. I think it's a vast improvement, to be quite honest with you. And hopefully we'll see what happens. But little conspiracy here. Remember, a player like Ike Bucker, he is going to be somebody who at the end of roster cuts, right, might be some value for him. And the Bills have removed his number from his photo on the Buffalo Bills roster site. So if you look at Ike Bucker, there's no number there. He's in a jersey, and they better brush that number out. Now, full transparency, Ryan Bates is the same. So is, let's see here, Kyle Allen, Matt Barkley.
They gave it to Kevin Jarvis
and Josh Allen. Yeah, they did a Kevin Jarvis the same way. But what I'm saying is that the offensive line is in a far better place than it was. But a player like David Edwards does carry a lot of value, to Mario's point, because it can help with that communication, which they struggled with last year. And I think he was here, again, just because you didn't know what you're going to be able to get in the draft. You ended up walking away with a really high-level guard at the draft position that you were able to snag him from. Good job, Buffalo, right? Like, what else could you ask for? You're not repurposing a tackle and moving him into guard just out of principle, right? Like, we've seen that happen a few times.
I agree.
I'm glad we're away from that.
Mario,
I agree.
do you know
Nick
who
Broker in the 7th was a steal.
Do you know who the 4 guards were last year going into training camp, Mario?
You're going to tell me right now, and I can't wait.
It was Ryan Bates, Roger Saffold.
Yes.
Uh,
We were
David
excited about
Quisenberry,
that, though. We were excited.
David
about that.
Quisenberry
Yes.
and Cody Ford. was still listed as the backup right guard to Ryan Bates.
Oh,
let's ask your question again.
I can't
Ooh.
stand
AK Cash says,
Quisenberry.
bring back Marshall Newhouse. Listen, we already convinced one team to foolishly trade for him. I don't think we're going to be able to convince another.
I mean, the fact that Quisenberry is now labeled as a right tackle, is that, I mean, you talk about guys
That
switching
speaks to
positions.
the quality of your guard play last year. That a now right tackle is listed as your backup left guard heading into training camp. Something has gone horribly wrong that he was getting snaps in that Dolphins game. Like
that seems to be
again,
the theme of the show.
To Paul's
tonight.
point, right? Like absolute warrior, dude was cramping. You could tell he was in pain. He was in and out of the lineup. Like the dude went to war. But if you go to war with a dull spear, you're gonna have problems. So
look at Ryan taking all the quotes tonight, man. He's talking about leaving port without the caulk or whatever the hell he was talking about.
Whoa, watch out.
Careful that word. That's a tricky one. That's a tricky one. That'll get you.
It's AULK, kids. Okay. But
yeah, I mean, I think when we talked at draft recap, we talked about Kincaid, right? And it was like, well, if you come away from the draft with the best pass catcher, regardless of position, the Bills came away with arguably the best interior offensive lineman. Don't worry about position. You've got to be happy about the position that you're in. You're not drafting a Cody Ford and trying to convert him to a position that he doesn't play in your rookie situation. You've got a legitimate guard to plug into that. And, the point was made in the chat that if all things are equal in camp between Bates and Torrance, I think Torrance has to be your starter coming out of camp. Now, does that mean Bates moves to the left side? We'll see what happens with McGovern, whatever. But, the rookie should get the nod in those situations. Yeah, it was Jessica that brought that up. And that's a great
exactly.
point.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Ryan's just reading the comments. He's been around long enough to learn.
I gave credit.
Her first legit comment, her first 6 comments was roasting me, apparently.
You do have a very Jared Allen-esque look tonight.
Nothing she said was incorrect, Mario.
No.
Boy, if that's not mansplaining, I don't know what is. Oh my God.
Jared Allen-esque.
Yeah.
That's too much. Ryan, I wanted to ask you this question before we got wildly off topic. How many wide receivers did the Buffalo Bills have on game day normally throughout the season? Do you remember?
It's typically
6
5.
or 7.
It's been 5.
It's been 5. Okay.
5 active. Yeah.
5 active.
5 active. So because I'm trying to figure out of the litany of receivers that are on her, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 wide receivers. Obviously, we know some free agents were brought in. Some of these guys might not make the roster. Some of those guys are, they're headed to the practice squad. Are there any interesting? Well, first of all, let's just do this. Who do you think is going to be this year's darling of camp that everyone just falls in love with? Number one, and I'll go clockwise again. With Joe, Paul, and Ryan. Who do you think is going to be the darling of camp, and who do you think eventually makes the the final 5 of this roster? Because I think that's going to be a very interesting topic going forward.
When you say the darling of camp, are you just talking about wide receiver, or are you talking
just
about
wide receiver? There's always one wide receiver that everyone just falls in love with. Like it was Duke Williams, then it was crap. Paul knows all these names.
It was Duke Williams for a while, so I don't blame you there.
Yeah,
no,
but I always dislike Duke Williams, so that's just me. So it's all right. I got a lot.
What was not to like about average speed?
Yeah, I know, right?
Average speed and average separation. What was not to like?
And not great hands either. Like what's great there. But anyway, so looking at the wide receiver position, you got your obvious. You got Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. I think those are the obvious, but unfortunately, I feel like that's where it stops, right? Like you could say Cleo Shakir is obviously going to make this team, but is he going to be the slot guy? Personally, as far as the darling goes, I think it's going to be Justin Shorter. I think he has great potential to be the darling coming in. Plus, unlike the undrafted free agents, he was drafted, so I feel like there's a little more pressure on him in that regard. If you're talking about the 5 that make the team, so I'm going to go Davis, Diggs, Shakir. Oh my gosh. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know. Sheffield, I guess, would make
Yeah.
the team, and then I'd
Hardy?
go with Justin Shorter. Yeah, I
Or
know Hardy's
Shorter?
there. I know.
Oh.
Yeah. I think
Oh,
Shorter makes the
okay.
team. I think it becomes that with
So you got
Garland.
Shorter, Davis, Diggs, Sherfield, and Shakir.
Yeah, and
I
I
like
think I like Johnson too as like a dark horse as well.
Keyshawn Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Just love the name, right?
I get it. I get
Just
it.
give me the damn ball.
So I think this group is more interesting than past years, right? Because first off, there's a ton of wide receivers that the Bills are rostering right now.
Mhm.
And I think the Bills probably walk away with their 53-man roster with 6, right? So while 5 be active on game days, typically the way that goes, you're going to walk away with 6. And it's really, really hard to imagine this team outside of your top 4, right? Who they've already committed, well, top 5 that they've already committed to in some form or fashion between Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Deontay Hardy, Khalil Shakur, and Trent Sherfield, right? Those players you've kind of already committed recent assets to. There's really only one spot after that. And then you kind of have to start playing the game of, well, if we waive the player at roster cuts, will they make it to our practice squad? So a player like Justin Shorter, I think, is more likely to make the roster and then be moved to the practice squad at a later time than he would be to be cut initially, right? Because while there's going to be a wave of very, very talented players when the league cuts down to 53 men and then everybody has a 16-player practice squad they need to fill, the fact of the matter is a player like Justin Shorter is real attractive to a lot of teams, regardless of what his film says, right? Because look at the size of him. He's the biggest wide receiver on the Bills roster next to Desmond Patman, who I don't even think most people on this stream have ever heard of, even though he's been in the league for 3 years.
Where'd he go? Where'd he go, Paul?
Well, of course he went to Washington. Come on, dude. You know where I was.
Of course you know who he
Washington
Of
was.
course
State.
I know who Desmond
Washington
Patman is. But the fact of the matter is, the one thing that I find most interesting is that players like Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy, because we've always seen the Bills carry that wide receiver that's just a special team specialist, right? I don't really know if there's that guy on the roster right now. I mean, maybe Ryan knows more than I do there. Ryan, is there that special teams ace player who you have to roster that happens to play wide receiver of the ones that are currently on the roster?
No, I was actually going to bring that up. I mean, Deontay Hardy's probably the closest, but they didn't sign him to be a return guy, right? Like, they've got Naheem Hines. They don't need, and this is the first time that I can think in a very long time that you're not trying to figure out who's going to get cut so that you can keep that, Andre Roberts on the roster, like the guy that's
or that Marcus Easley, right?
Those guys.
Yeah,
like it's so refreshing. Like, and Joe kind of started doing the depth chart thing. Like, it's Davis, Diggs, Shakir, Hardy, Sherfield. Like, those are the 5, I think, no brainers in terms of sticking on the roster. In terms of the darling Mario, the Bills fans that go to camp are going to absolutely fall in love with Deontay Hardy, because when you talk about pure speed, if Bills fans thought like Isaiah McKenzie was fast, wait till they watch Deontay Hardy. That dude can fly, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I hope at some point in camp that him and Hines line up side by side and decide to do some type of a foot race, because that will be fun to watch, because those dudes can, like, you can't teach speed, and Deontay Hardy is fast as hell.
He's so little, though. He's so little.
Yeah, I mean, but if you can't catch him, it's hard to put a hit on him if he's catching a 3-yard slant, and then he's just going to go down when he gets around people, which is typically how those go. But if he runs by you, it doesn't matter how small he is. Allen just needs to put it out there. So
I think the 1999 version of the Rams and just run out of bounds like they all did. Holt and Bruce always would catch the ball and run out of bounds.
Catch it and fall down. But Shorter, I think Paul brings up a really good point about Shorter. I don't know that he's the kind of guy that slips through to the practice squad unless it's like mid-season, unless it's like a mid-season situation. So I absolutely can see him making the roster out of camp, hoping to either him developing into some type of a special teams contributor in year 1 and maybe seeing some time at the wide receiver position, or trying to slip him through at some point, whether there's an injury or something along those lines. The rest of the guys, it's just a lot of guys, right? Like it's camp fodder. It's guys so that Diggs and Davis don't have to play in the preseason. Like, that's why a lot of these guys are on the roster at this point. But this is a really fun position to watch, and it's been a long time since the position's been fun other than wide receiver 1. And to see, like, what are they going to do at wide receiver 3? Is it Shakir? Is it Sherfield that they gave the money to? Is it Hardy that they gave the big contract to? Are they going to use Hardy like they used Isaiah McKenzie? Like, there's just so many fun questions to ask about this team. Do they have a guy that steps in and fills in for Davis if and when he departs next year? Again, I think that's one of the fun camp battles that I'm really looking forward to, is what's going to happen at that position, that position behind Diggs and Davis.
I just wanted to highlight the super chat really quick. Make sure we got that.
What the hell just happened? Who did that?
I did, so you could talk about the super chat, Paul. Go ahead.
I'll move over here. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to AK. Oh, what the hell are we doing here? Thanks again to AK Cash. Are going to the Williams Syndrome Foundation, so thank you so much for your donation. I just want to say this: people are talking about teams might alter their rosters for the new kickoff rule. You still need a punt team, and in my opinion, that's not much different. I do think that the NFL is trying to craft the rules to make special teams a little less important, right? Mm-hmm. While it used to be a very exciting time of the game, the fact is I think the NFL has identified it's just injury risk. And they're really, like, if the onside kick rule is they don't care about fair. Like, that onside kick rule is absolute trash. You're better off just lining up for a regular kickoff and then having Tyler Bass kick it as hard as he can at the guy in front of him. Do that.
That would be fun to watch.
Yes. That would be way more fun to watch, right?
Didn't he do that with 13 seconds left?
Oh.
No, he kicked it deep. If
he
would have done that, they probably would have won that game.
All right. Good night, everybody. So, so thanks again to AK. But yeah, it's as far as overall rosters themselves, I don't know what really is going to happen with the overall roster, and if anybody's going to do anything specific with maybe you see the Bills carry an actual player versus those special teams aces. Yeah,
I mean, I think to AK's point, I think what happens in this situation now is the kickoff returner becomes an afterthought. Like. Mm-hmm. We've got a guy who we can throw back there who can call for fair catch, right? It becomes a Micah Hyde versus a Andre Roberts, right? A guy who's just going to be sure-handed with the football, wave your hand in the air. I wouldn't be surprised if you had some teams who just adopted a philosophy. I could definitely see this being a Belichick thing of just like everything's just going to be either a fair catch or a touchback. Like, we're not even going to try to field kickoffs at this point. Mm-hmm. That's what that rule creates the opportunity to do. The next iteration of this is that they're just going to say, we're not going to do the kickoff. It's just going to be score a touchdown. The other team gets the ball to 25 and we're just going to go. So, I definitely can see AK's point that they are just going to kind of phase out the kickoff specialist role. But I don't even know if teams carry kickoff specialists anymore, but let's not
revisit that horror story of a turn. Remember when we carried 3 kickers, guys?
I remember vividly when we carried 3 kickers because Ryan Lindell couldn't get it past the 20-yard line off a tee.
That happens when you get older.
They got medication for that.
And now a word from our sponsor, Cialis.
Oh, you guys would be shocked the things that get brought to us as sponsorship packages that we just say no thank you to.
God.
You guys would be shocked. We spare you.
A lot of CB. An awful lot. Was it CB2? Is that what it's called? What's it called?
The
CBD.
Don't
CBD,
say it because you're just helping them. Don't.
I'm all over Career Elam with CB2. No, it's CBD. Like, we get so many people that are like, "Hey, you guys should sponsor. You guys want to sponsor?" I'm like, "What? No."
You should use CBD, Mario. I think you would benefit from it. You seem uptight.
When did this turn into an intervention?
There's so many places to go with this, and I don't even know where to start.
I know where to start. There we go.
That was last we saw of Ryan. So thanks for joining us, Ryan.
It's all we can do because he doesn't have the controls for it.
So
I'm the
let me
only
tell-
one that can't do
Listen,
anything about it.
Mario, someone should take the controls away from Mario the way this is going.
I've been in the chat all night and I've been behaving, so shut up.
So let me tell you a fun story. We all, except for Joe, we've all been in this group chat for a really long time. And when I would get really upset about something or somebody was going on about something that I thought was very valid, but I just didn't want to hear it, I would just kick them out of the group chat. I would just like bait them in a little and then I would just kick them out. And that was it. That's all I did. Then I'd like not pay attention to the chat forever. Oh, yeah. No, I did not drive this week.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, I did not drive
No,
this
he
week.
was looking up a lot of stuff. And by him looking it up, I was looking it up. So, I mean, guys, I'm interested to see how, if we can actually get back on topic for a little bit. We got about 10 minutes left. I'm really interested to see how Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid are working together and what are something. Obviously, you're not going to see everything at camp of what the Bills have dialed up for the 2023 season. You might see, little glimpses here and there of that. And I'm so interested to see how initially the base packages of how he uses Knox and Kincaid. Maybe in 12 personnel, 22 personnel, maybe just goal line is what you see. But I'm so interested to see how that dynamic plays out because as a second-year play caller, obviously everyone on this panel, I believe, has a concern for Dorsey heading into 2023. How much of a concern can you have for a guy that had a team that scored as many points as they did, only lost 3 games by a total of 8 points? You know what I mean? So he left a lot on the table.
If you listen to Thad Brown, if you guys follow Thad Brown on Twitter, which I don't recommend, Dorsey was better at every metric than Dable was. So there's no problem at the offensive coordinator position, guys.
You have to be very careful when Ryan starts quoting Twitter because he's been blocked by so many people that actually matter that the viewpoint that he has is pretty thin.
I would argue I haven't been blocked by anybody who matters on Twitter. So,
well, let's speaking of,
right,
I mean,
fair.
I'll just give you this, Ryan. I'll give you this metric, and Paul, you shut your damn mouth before I even say this. By all accounts, in every metric, I am the same height and weight as Josh Allen. Yet you are not going to confuse the two of us ever. So when people start talking about metrics as far as it goes with the NFL, yeah, they scored a lot of points. Was Josh Allen 80% of the offense and, seemed like absolutely burned out in that Cincinnati Bengal game? Was he like that when he was with Dable? Or was he still like ready to go and ready to take the field when Kansas City got the ball in that overtime game? Like he still had some juice left in the tank in that Kansas City game. The Cincinnati game, it seemed like he had nothing left. And it could have been the long season, could have been a lot of different things, but I don't, nah.
No, I mean, I completely, it was tongue in cheek in case anyone didn't catch that.
See, he almost said it. He almost agreed with me for the first time in his life.
Yeah, careful with, I'm just going to tread lightly with the Thad Brown stuff. I don't want to kick a hornet's nest or anything like that. But, no, I think it is interesting to see what those roles will look like at the tight end position. I think, this is a significant make or break year for Ken Dorsey. I mean, if he, he's obviously trying to parlay this into a head coaching position. That's I don't know many guys who get into coaching to be an offensive coordinator, right? Like he saw Brian Dable take that next step. Josh Allen is the cash cow that will continue to give until his body breaks down. So Dorsey has every opportunity to turn this into a head coaching position. He also has a very real possibility that he could lose his job after 2 years and have to start over again as a quarterback's coach. This is a significant make or break year because you can argue that the Bills have done exactly what they did for Josh Allen for Ken Dorsey. When Josh Allen came in, he had no talent around him. They went out and got all kinds of talent. And it was like, okay, kid, we got a good offensive coordinator we believe in. We've got a high-powered offense now. Go win football games. And he did. Ken Dorsey they had excuses last year, right? Like whether they used them internally or not, they had excuses. They had a crappy offensive line. They had a ton of things go wrong off the field. They had injuries on the field. They had a brand new offensive coordinator, which always gets the first year. And now they've fixed a lot of those problems. And Ken Dorsey has to deliver another top 5, if not top 3 offense in the NFL. And if they do not win the Super Bowl, it cannot be because the offense stalls out when it matters the most, and you can't game plan for your own home stadium in your own home climate like you did against the Cincinnati Bengals. So he's got to come out and score 30, 35 points every single game, and they've got to go out and just bludgeon teams. You can't stall in the second quarter. You can't stall in the third quarter. You've got to come out and score points and then go foot to throat on offense. And if they don't, then again, Dorsey's going to find himself back at the back of the line for offensive coordinator positions, or he can accelerate himself to the front of the line for a lot of head coaching positions that are going to open up after this year.
I agree with you, Mario. I am very interested to see the Kincaid Knox situation, only because last year the Buffalo Bills ran personnel 11, 3 wide receiver sets 70% of the time, top 5 in the NFL. And so in those sets, you don't have 2 tight ends on the field. So I don't think Ken Dorsey is going to change his offensive philosophy. So what's going to happen with those 2 guys? It's going to be very interesting.
It's Mario and I cut an episode this week, and just to preview that, we talked about Patrick Mahomes and the average yards per touchdown, and Patty Mahomes was under 5.
Fascinating stat.
It's wild. So we cut an episode in the car about it this week.
Andy Reid is him.
That's what I mean, right? It's talk about evolution. It's a really great episode. You'll have to catch it later this week. But the crux of part of that conversation is Patrick Mahomes averaged less than 5 yards per touchdown last year. And when you look at the way the Bills are building their roster, it's kind of like they're getting the hint, right? Like you look at the speed that they've added and you look at the players that they've added, they said, listen, our goal this year is to get faster, not necessarily do anything more than we just need to get faster. And you've done it at the running back position, right? And I think that's a great job. But to go back to the Ken Dorsey point, if things aren't clicking, there's a couple guys on this roster who've been offensive coordinators already. A couple guys on the coaching staff. Joe Brady, quarterback's coach, is a previous offensive coordinator. Mike Shula is an offensive assistant. So he's obviously previous head coach and offensive coordinator. Like there's guys who could step in. It's not like you're going to run into a situation where you have, an interim offensive coordinator who's never done the job before, and then he happens to become the interim head coach, and then he happens to tank the San Diego Chargers for 4 years. It's sometimes you have to be prepared for success. I think Buffalo's done a good job of that. But Ken Dorsey's maturation as a play caller does make you wonder if there's enough new school in that thought process, right? Because you look at teams that are going to be real successful for the next few years. Speed. Buffalo's got that on tape now, right? But the question is the play calling going to evolve with that? And Mar, you tell me. Like I still have my doubts.
Nah.
All right, good take. Have a good night, everybody.
No, I think that has to be as we try to wrap this up, it has to be the biggest concern on any Bills fan right now is not only the play calling evolving, but the utilization of Josh Allen. Like I made a joke about it in the car today saying that he was like 86% of the offense. I don't know what the exact number was, but I know it was above 80 of what Josh Allen accounts for in the offense. And if you're going to run him into the ground, we remember this is Ken Dorsey. Dorsey worked with Cam Newton, and we all saw how his career fell off a cliff because he was utilized way too much in a lot of the things that he was doing. So if the maturation of Josh Allen along with Kevin Dorsey this year, it comes to fruition, I think a lot of Buffalo Bills fans will be very, very happy in February. If it does not, I mean, we're talking about a team that was in 3 out of 6 years, the top 2 in defense and laid off their defensive coordinator. Like, what's going to happen with Dorsey? What might, people might just attribute all of his success to Allen. Like a lot of people on Twitter are attributing Allen's success to Diggs. Allen was never good until he had Diggs. Okay, all right, let's relax a little bit on that one.
Yeah,
Josh Allen was drafted by a playoff team. Great point.
I mean, he was.
I think Dable's success in New York, I think, will go a long way in helping Ken Dorsey if he has another solid year with Allen at the helm. Because Dable, that was the big criticism of Dable, right? Well, he had Josh Allen. He was nothing before Allen showed up. Now he's got Josh Allen, and all of a sudden he's going to be a good head coach. That doesn't equal in that situation. And then he comes out and he's a great head coach, right? Like everything's going well in New York. It seems like they're poised to make some noise in that NFC East this year. So, I mean, Dorsey definitely can help his situation. But, I mean, to Paul's point, like, can we see – we need to see some scheme changes from Dorsey. We need to see him being willing to go to the well on plays and schemes and formats until a team stops him. It seemed like last year Dorsey was very much like, hey, that play worked. I don't want to go back to it just in case the defense sees it coming and then they make a big play on it. And you look at a guy like Andy Reid, like he goes to the well until that well is bone dry and until Mahomes either throws an interception, makes a bad play, comes off the sideline and tells him to stop calling it, whatever the case. But that's one thing I need to see from Dorsey is he needs to do a better job of just calling the plays that work and letting Allen go out and do what he does. The other thing that I need him to do is not run Allen in the red zone. And some of that comes from, to Paul's point, the speed, right? Hey, you come out with a formation of, Sherfield, Hines, Cook, and Deontay Hardy. And it's like, just give one of the guys the ball and just let them try to beat somebody to a corner. Like sometimes that's okay to do. And Kansas City does that a lot, right? Like McCole Hardman signed a giant contract because he was beat the guy to the corner guy. And that's what he made his bones on. And Isaiah Pacheco, same reason he was successful there in Kansas City, because he was just faster than the linebackers who were either spying him or manning him up in the red zone. And he just beat him to the corner. I mean, Mario, how many times did you run that playing football in high school and college, right? Like it's just, sometimes it's just a stretch play to the outside. Hope that your wide receiver can get enough of the corner to give you the edge and you just run to the pylon. And that's how you score touchdowns. And that's okay. And they've added personnel to do that this year. But the question will be, is that how Dorsey's going to use them? Or is Dorsey going to run more quarterback options inside the 10-yard line and let Allen, right, wrong, or indifferent, let Allen make the play he thinks is best, which 9 times out of 10 is Allen keeps the ball and tries to run somebody over or jump over a pile or something like that. And that's where your quarterback gets hurt.
Yeah, we got to figure out whether or not what that is. It might be Allen just calling his own number because he doesn't trust anybody else.
But that's your job as the offensive coordinator, is to call plays that he feels comfortable running and not plays that he feels like he needs to audible out of. Take the ball out of his hands, because if you leave it in his hands, he's always going to go to playground Josh, and that's who he is. That's what's got him to the league. He's going to just go like Joe would say, right? Josh is going to Josh. And if you leave the ball in his hands inside the 10-yard line and give him an option, he's going to make what Bills fans would define as the wrong decision, and that's to keep it. Whether he winds up in the end zone or not is irrelevant. After that, he's taken enough shots.
I love that Ryan cuts Joe off and then quotes Joe.
Right?
Yeah, that's the best way to do it, right? I know what he's going to say.
Don't forget, and don't forget, though, we didn't just add speed. We also have Damian Harris now, too. So we don't need Josh Allen doing 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. Like, nah, hand the ball off to the big guy. Let him get that.
Absolutely.
That's why we got him. So, yeah, you have the speed for the outside. You have someone who can go on the inside. No need to give him the ball in the red zone. I agree with that, right?
And bring in Mario's guy, Reggie Gilliam, to lead the way up the middle.
How dare you? Not even close. Don't even put that in the Twitterverse or anything. He's not my guy at all. Yeah, Marlo and Neil, those are my boys. They're probably both going to get cut. But the point is this. All right, Paul, let's go down the line. We'll go for you, Joe, Ryan, and then myself. One battle you're interested in seeing in camp, and we'll wrap this one up.
I would like to counter and say, who is the one defensive end the Bills are going to cut, and why is it Shaq Lawson?
God damn it! I can't wait until roster cutdown day, and he's on the roster, and I can just. I'm never going to let you live it down for the rest of time.
I only said it to mess with you. I said it in an episode that Mario said we're not going to air this week, so I had to bring it back. I said it this morning in the car.
I almost veered off the road when he said it.
Yeah, and I chuckled. I was like, that was only for Ryan Lathor.
You were waiting for me to pop up out of the back seat, right?
That's it. So camp battle. I really don't think I don't think there's going to be a lot of camp battles. I think the battle lines are pretty well drawn. I think everybody kind of knows where things are going to go. There's a pretty well-defined roster right now. You kind of tell where everything's going to go. I think a lot of attention is going to go to Kier Elam versus whoever happens to be CB2, Christian Benford, Dean Jackson, insert guy that they are hot with this week. But you can't tell me that Kier Elam isn't an elite level athlete, because he is. And I know one thing about this team, and they will hedge their bets on the elite level athlete, right? So you might hear smoke and mirrors about exactly. But you're going to hear smoke and mirrors about the CB2 battle. Just that patience is a virtue there, right? Like, I can't believe that we rolled out Dane Jackson and Christian Benford as our starting 1 and 2 last year, but there we were winning football games for some unbelievable reason. It's just patience is a virtue there. Other than that, I don't really know if there's a camp battle that I'm looking forward to, other than just seeing how players mature into their roles.
Yeah, the one camp battle I'm looking forward to, and I don't think anyone would have this on their bingo card, is if DJ Dale makes the team or not. DJ Dale, undrafted free agent. We picked him up defensive tackle. If you look at the future of the Bills at defensive tackle, we talked about before on the show, kind of thin. The cupboard's bare. And so DJ Dale out of Alabama, Alabama, love him or hate him, they know defense. So I'm looking forward to see how he does. And if there's a spot for him on the practice squad to see what the Bills plan to do in the future when it comes to defensive tackle. I know we re-signed Ed Oliver, but what's after that? So I agree with Paul. As far as starters go, there's not too much to look forward to. Obviously, we're going to watch. We're going to hope we avoid injury, because that will obviously change the whole ball game. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, Alabama, they should know how to feed those boys.
Yeah,
they grow them big down there.
They grow them big down there. That's right.
This is gonna be a strange training camp for us to watch. Like,
oh yeah,
in the past, like, it's always been who's going to be the quarterback, like who's going to be the left tackle, like punter palooza. This is our first offseason in how long where there's not going to be a punter or kicker battle at camp, right? Like, when's the last time that happened?
Hey, Tyler Bass walking into a contract year. Always beware of the players in contract years.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really like there's not really a lot of camp battles to look at. Like, when I've covered camp in the past, it's always been like you go and it's like, I'm going to watch the offensive line today to see who's going to come out with the first team for the first time, and who's wide receiver 2 when the huddle breaks for the first time at camp, and like all that stuff's out the window. I'm interested in seeing what happens at wide receiver 3. It's been mentioned a couple times in the chat by some folks. So I'm really interested to see like Khalil Shakir. Like, he flashed a couple times last season. Is the reason he didn't get on the field more because of McDermott's issue with starting rookies at skill positions, because that's been his trend in the past, is that rookies just don't get time at skill positions. Is that, how is Shakir gonna develop? The new wide receivers that they brought in, it's going to be interesting to see how they use them in Sherfield and Hardy, for sure. And then I think the other thing is you look at that defensive tackle position and how do they cycle those players through that defensive tackle rotation. And Oliver, obviously the one and only mainstay heading into DeQuan Jones, Poona Ford, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips. Like, how does that rotation look? Again, it's interesting to look at a team that now Jordan Phillips is going to be battling to even get on the field. Like, when's the last time that we thought that would happen, that a guy of that type of talent, that type of skill would be 5th on the depth chart at a position of such significance? So it's just really interesting, I guess, to look at a training camp for a team that finally seems to be no holes from top to bottom for the first time I can remember. And again, Super Bowl favorites last year, but there were significant questions going into training camp at certain positions. And I just don't have those questions this year. And that's why it just puzzles me, where everybody's like, oh, the Dolphins are going to win the division, or the Jets are going to win the division. Like, you can argue this is the best talent. This is the best, most talented roster that the Buffalo Bills have ever had. You could legitimately make that argument. and that goes including those '90s teams. I just don't see how a team who lost 3 games by a combined 8 points last year has gotten significantly better than they were last year. This year, completely healthy, and the depth that they've got, I just don't see how they're not the far and away favorites to win that division. So it's just going to be a fun camp to go and just watch stuff instead of like studying and like zooming in on specific positions. Just watch the whole thing.
It's all in, I love it that Ryan always leaves some meat on the bone for me at the end of the show. Like what battles are left for me to talk about here. As far as the, not so much battles. Like I agree with a lot of you guys. The softball ones are, who's going to be wide receiver 3, who's going to be, CB2 and defensive end. I mean, the fact that on our lads, you have Boogie Basham, Jordan Phillips, and AJ Epineza listed 3rd on the depth chart of all those positions. Like those guys were all on the field at some point in recent history for the Buffalo Bills. Now they're all 3rd on the depth chart for you because of the talent that you've acquired. I selfishly want the Buffalo Bills, and I know this is going to sound awful, but I want them to have Dane Jackson move to slot corner. And I've wanted them to do that since they drafted him because of his physicality. Just because I want to see Alex Austin as a backup corner. Because I just think that this team, if it knows one thing, it knows corners. And, Sear Neal, if Taron Johnson goes down, who are you more comfortable covering a slot receiver? Do you feel Sear Neal or Dane Jackson covering a slot wide receiver? I feel more comfortable with Dane Jackson. I know Paul's take on this, so don't worry about it. But as far as a singular player, I'm really curious to see what they do with Dorian Williams. Mm-hmm. I'm so curious to see, because you you do a 3rd round pick on that guy when your linebacker room is in deep question. I'm so curious to see what they do with him. Like, where is he going to be playing? I know it's going to be the biggest thing going on in camp. I just got a feeling that, like, oh, wait, he's on the field. Milano's not. He's on the field with Milano. He's on the field, and all this other stuff. So I'm very curious. With that kind of speed, it's hard to keep that off the field. So I'm very curious to see what Dorian Williams does.
And with that, Mar, right? It's not like you're talking about a linebacker. So even at roster cutdown day, you're talking about a position that takes a while to get used to inside each individual defense. It's not like a defensive end where it's like, hey, go knock that guy down with the ball. It's a little bit simpler, right? Where you can kind of fill holes at defensive end, at defensive tackle. That linebacker position, the Bills are pretty committed to this being their group. And I think that says a lot about their confidence or their ignorance. I guess we'll find out.
They have given the keys to the car to a rookie linebacker before, but it was a 1st rounder, not a 3rd round.
Yeah, he was also 4 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier.
Freak.
And 4 years younger.
And truth be told, he never played. He was a pass rusher, right? Like he wasn't.
He's still
really
19,
a
isn't he?
guy. Yeah,
I'm just kidding. This was the last year that he's younger than he's going to be younger than any of the prospects. Yeah, I think Herndon Hooker was younger than or older than Edmonds this year. I think it'll be the last year.
That's hysterical. All right, for all you guys in the comments, before you leave a like, and if it's your first time here, leave a subscribe to #sports. Make sure you hit us up at all the socials: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All of our stuff can be found on iTunes and Spotify. For our sponsor, Mr. Rogers Homes, and in association with Crier.co. From right to left, you got Paul, Joe, Ryan. I am Mario. Thank you for joining #sports. We have car videos coming out the next 2 weeks. We'll see you guys next Sunday. We're out of here.
Hello, fellow Bills fans. Sean Rogers, Realtor and lead of the Mr. Rogers Homes team. Did you know that real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth, and right now is one of the best times to own an investment property in Arizona? Please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions so we can take the next step to your financial freedom here in the Valley of the Sun, utilizing real estate. As always, God bless America and go Buffalo!